You are super serious, aren't you? Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel. You can put your hand down now. It's alright. What's up, everybody? This is the MQ9 Predator Mod for DCS. This is a pretty cool mod. I don't know that it is really fully fleshed out. Well, I'm sure it's not because of some quirks that I've seen, but it is a pretty neat mod, and I've had fun flying around in it, so I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, just in case it was something you might be interested in or want to fly around. And again, it is pretty cool to fly around in it. I'll go over the quirks that I've noticed first and then talk about some other things regarding the mod. But the first quirk is that the landing gear goes through that pod on the bottom. I'm not exactly sure how the landing gear on these really works, but and I don't know how that pod really attaches or if that pod even attaches to the real thing. I assume it does, but the landing gear shouldn't go through it, so that was interesting. I was not able to figure out how to fire missiles or lock targets up. There are a lot of different controls that you can map, so it looked like it was fairly well thought out and that there were some sensors involved and some things that you could do to have situational awareness and lock targets up and attack targets, but I could not figure out how to do that. I mapped all the controls, and the only way I could see the targets was to fly directly at them, and then there is a circle that you can kind of slew around a little bit, but the lock function wasn't really working. So I never figured that out. That's not really a quirk, it's just that I haven't figured it out yet, and I don't believe there's a manual for it that I found yet. Perhaps there's a forum post somewhere that could talk about what exactly you do to use the sensors and lock targets up and employ the missiles. So, but I haven't found any of that out yet. The other quirk that I noticed was in certain regimes of flight, it gets really, really weird. So I usually don't fly things correctly, and when I first get a module or a mod, I'll just go do weird things with it to see what happens. I'm certain that these Predator drones are not meant to do loops and lots of barrel rolls and things like that based on how they are constructed and what their intended role is. I don't know if it's capable of doing one or not, but regardless, you can see that it starts bouncing as I tried to do a loop. I got a little past vertical and it just started bouncing. I assumed it was just going to fall on its back and crash, but it just kept doing really weird sort of bouncing things and then pausing here. This isn't the game freezing, it's the mod. It's the aircraft just sort of pausing in the sky. It eventually came back down, and I don't know how much of that was my control and how much of it was the drone itself. So that's a little bit weird, to say the least. But aside from that, it flew pretty well. The HUD is nice. It took me a minute to figure out exactly how to ensure that I was flying straight and level. It seems to be pointed nose down a little bit. I don't know if that's the way the real pilot station would look or the interface would look in real life or not, but to fly level it felt like I was pointing down, but after I figured that out, it was pretty easy to fly. There is a little bit of oddities with the collision models, and I don't believe it's with the static objects in DCS because I've crashed into trees before and have blown up. I think it's more with the wings on this Predator drone. They're pretty wide, and you can take quite a bit of the wing through a tree and not crash, not have a wing fall off or anything like that. So that's probably collision models or damage models on the mod itself. And you'll see some examples of that here in a minute. I don't mind clipping trees a little bit because that's fairly realistic depending on what you're in. There are plenty of videos out there, or pictures certainly, of World War II aircraft that have clipped trees. The Thunderbolt, the P-47, was fairly famous for getting into the tops of the trees with the prop and coming back with tree debris in the cowlings and things like that. I don't know that it happened all the time, but it certainly is documented. And of course there's some really famous videos of MD500s clipping trees as people were hunting out of them, I think in Australia or New Zealand or something like that. They also do tree trimming with MD500s with saw blades hanging from the bottom of them. That's kind of interesting. I don't know that I've seen any videos of the rotors themselves getting into the trees, but anyway, it happens. So I could see that being something that would be allowable in DCS, not necessarily programmed in, but depending on how the collision models are set up. You know, I wouldn't want to barely clip a tree and then instantly blow up and die necessarily in the sim. But that's not really what this sim is for, so I don't know that it would matter if that did happen. However, if you pretty much run half your aircraft through a tree, you should probably destroy the aircraft. So that was pretty close. Well, that was way more than close. The first tree was kind of marginal, but after that it was just horrible in terms of how much I clipped through those trees, and it didn't die. So these aren't so bad, and I think I barely got the wingtip under that bridge. It's hard to tell, and especially if the collision model isn't fleshed out, it's kind of hard to tell if you really made it or not. So on these bridges, you'll see here in a minute, I'm going to turn around and fly under them, and from the HUD view, it looked like I may have made it. However, with how wide these wings are compared to what you see in the HUD, it's very possible I didn't. So, it's hard to tell. So, and from this external footage, it's really hard to tell as well. So those are all of the quirks that I noticed with this mod. The biggest issue I had with it was just not knowing how to employ the weapons, which again, that's not a quirk necessarily, that's just a lack of knowledge on my part. As far as flying it around, if you can get past the damage model not being fleshed out or not being perfect or even close to perfect, I think that it's a lot of fun to fly. So with all that being said, I do think it's a mod worth checking out, not necessarily if you're not into this kind of a aircraft at all, or this kind of a drone, I should say, at all. If you're not really into it, I wouldn't necessarily mess around with it, but it's something that I wouldn't mind seeing in the future in DCS officially, if we could. It could add some dynamic to the online battlefield for sure, and it could add some resources for mission building and things like that. So first bridge, we're for sure cool. Second bridge, I'm not quite sure. I got low. I should have included the HUD view, but I didn't have it. I didn't record it. So there you have it. It's worth checking out if you're into it, again. And I've enjoyed flying it around. So with that, I'll sign off. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and happy flying.